Russia says it's taken control of the southern Ukrainian port city of Mariupol, but Ukraine says it still holds the city, where officials believe thousands have died. And Mariupol is just one of the Ukrainian cities from which thousands of civilians are fleeing. More than 4.6 million refugees have fled the country since the start of the war in just late February. Many want to come to Canada. To date, Canada has received 119,000, just over that, 409 applications. More than 31,000 have been approved. And so far, almost 14,000 Ukrainians have made it to Canada since the start of the year. Lloyd Axworthy is chair of the World Refugee Council. Of course, he previously served as Minister of Foreign Affairs here in Canada. Mr. Axworthy joins us from Winnipeg. Hi there. Good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Good evening, Darcy.
I wanted to start off on those numbers, and in particular, the gap between how many have applied, approved, and then how many have actually made it to Canada. What do you read into those numbers?
Well, what I read very quickly is that there's a major sort of set of hurdles and handicaps in between the application and the resettlement. And I think that's something that really has to be tackled very quickly. I think that what is really at stake here is literally life and death issues for people. And I think that we have to have a system that's a lot more flexible and a lot more accessible than it is presently. You know, Vassie, I think one of the problems is that for the last several years, our immigration program has really been driven a lot by security-related issues, and that results in more demand for documentation and other kinds of investigations. And what it does also, it really slows down the kind of sort of emergency issue that we're now facing in Ukraine, as well as in other parts of the world.
We were in Poland a few weeks ago and speaking to some of those people trying to come here. And certainly one thing that jumped out at me was even just the cost of coming to Canada. It can be prohibitive, right? Like you have to pay quite a bit to get on the plane. And that was prohibited for some people we spoke to. Do you think there's a role for government in any of that?
Well, there's a very simple role. We could be doing airlifts, as other countries are doing. I mean, I think if the program was under the sort of conventional refugee program, there would be financing for those kinds of efforts. When I was an immigration minister way back many moons ago, we had the large-scale movement of people out of Indochina, out of Vietnam. And one of the things we relied upon was the sponsorship of Canadians who were able to help defray the costs and pick up. Clearly, as we know, there's a lot of support in Canada for doing the same, but that particular initiative hasn't been triggered. We're not using sponsorship the same way, and therefore we're putting a lot of the onus back on the individuals themselves who are coming. And I think that it really is requiring some serious rethinking at this point in time. I think there's been a lot of tinkering going on. Some of it's made for improvements. But right now, we have a system that really is kind of, putting it bluntly, kind of constipated.
I actually want to ask you about almost the other end of the system, and that is once refugees actually arrive here. Because the other thing that we heard quite frequently was a concern about a lack of access to services. Since we were in Poland, some of the tinkering you point to, for example, some provinces have stepped forward where healthcare is concerned and said, no, you're going to be fully covered. When I asked the federal minister about it at the time, though, you know, are you going to supply the resources for that? Are you going to coordinate it? Essentially, the response was those conversations are going on. What is the role, do you think, or what could be the role of the federal government in coordinating this to ensure that services like that are available no matter where these refugees come in this country?
Vassie, by way of background, I'm serving right now as a co-chair of an immigration advisory council in Manitoba. And I know that this is already something that's in front of the council, is how do we provide a much higher level of coordination, reception, resettlement, health services, counseling services, education. And there's an effort. We're going to try to make an effort here, but there's no, your point is absolutely right. This is something that the federal government, the federal minister should be immediately, I mean, there's been some official meetings, but to really bring together his counterparts and say, look, we have to get away from this checkerboard and we have to do things in a kind of integrated way. We can't treat this just as an administrative problem. It really is, as I said, kind of a sacred trust that we have to make sure that we live up to. And that really means that there's going to be a very high level of cooperation federally.
Just before I let you go, sort of tangential to this, but a different subject, Mr. Axworthy, is the struggles Afghan refugees have faced coming to Canada. Because this same week, we were listening to some interpreters testify before committee, interpreters who are trying to get the rest of their family here to absolutely no avail. They express, understanding and even happiness at how the system for Ukrainians is a little bit more streamlined, but frustration at how they are not facing the same process. In fact, one that just seems so much more cumbersome. And certainly the numbers bear that out. Do they have a point?
No, they have a point, but they also have a crisis on their hands. I think Canada has made a major commitment. Look, we have a reputation, which I think we have to carefully guard and nurture, of being one of the few countries left in the world that has a somewhat open, tolerant reception of people who have been displaced. The Afghan situation has all the every element of tragedy to it, because so many of them put their faith in Canada and other countries by becoming interpreters and working on relief projects and education. And now many of them feel betrayed. They just feel that those commitments are not being honored. And again, I think when you see the veterans appearing before the committee, why aren't we enlisting them, recruiting them, putting them together, sitting down and saying, how do we make sure that we can eliminate all these blockages and hoops that people have to go through? There are answers, there are solutions. And this is, I think, where the Minister of Immigration has a lot of discretion and should be exercising, in that sense, a fresh look. He's a new minister. He's got a great reputation as a member of Parliament. I think this is the time to take a look at the system and say, so why is it dragging? Why are there so many impediments to actually moving people here who are facing a dire, terrible situation? If I can give one example, at our council, we've been trying to convince the government, and we actually have one of our council members, Senator Odovar, has a bill in the Senate saying, look, we're freezing assets. We're developing a large set of frozen assets. Let's take those assets and redispose them to the people who need it, refugees, displaced persons, to help pay the enormous costs that are being encountered along the way. There are innovative solutions, and I really think that this is a one of those times when the Canadians have to pull together to make it work.
Thanks, Mr. Axworthy. I'll leave it there. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vassie. Okay, you're welcome.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.